Hello and welcome to EduDay. Today we're going to be presenting a presentation on Microsoft Teams for beginners. I'd like to thank you for attending. We encourage people to ask questions via the Q&A chat function, and we will answer them throughout the session. Sessions are recorded, so post questions anonymously if you don't wish to share your name. Recordings of the event will be made available via the Microsoft Teams after the event. If you experience any sound problems, please close the meeting and come back in. Before we start, I would like to do an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and sea who have walked and cared for this land for thousands of years, and their descendants who maintain their spiritual connections and traditions. We would like to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So good afternoon. My name is Nathan Richards. I'm a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert, and I work for Brisbane Catholic Education. For today's session, let's have a quick look at our agenda. So this is primarily, first of all, for people that are just starting out with Microsoft Teams. So either you are yet to open it up and explore Microsoft Teams, or you have just started using it and you're very new to that environment and maybe haven't started engaging with students yet. We're going to have a look at the physical space, so how it looks and what all the sections mean inside of Teams. We're going to look at how you're going to be able to create a team, then how you can manage that team. Then we're going to have a look at some top tips, and we will see how we go for questions. As I said, use the chat function if you have any questions throughout the session. So just as a reminder that this is just for beginners, there are some other Teams related sessions that we'll run, which you can see on the screen. So these recordings will also be made if you can't make your way to them throughout the day or you're not available, and they'll be made available on the Microsoft YouTube channel. Let's start by having a look at the space that is Teams. So let's have a look at what we call the Me space. So this section here on the left-hand side is what we call the Me space and part of Microsoft Teams. So there are three main spaces to know when working in Teams, and we're going to start by looking at this one first. Inside of the Me space, we have what we call the app bar. The app bar is this section here on the right, on the left, and it basically lists all of the different features that are available for you to toggle through as part of Microsoft Teams. So you're probably already aware that obviously that we have these things called teams that you work in, but you also have chats. We also have an assignment manager. You can have your calendars in there. We'll go through them a little bit later on. So the left rail is here. It's the second area that makes up the Me space. The left rail is what you see when you open up your team. So if you use Team in what we call tile view, this will open up and it will show you the left rail. And this will look the same across all the different types of teams. So you'll notice that there are other apps that can select in the app bar as well, like the chat function. When you select these apps, the left rail will change to show you the list of chats that you've had. So the left rail will always change based on what you've chosen from the app bar. Continuing on, we have into the We space, we have this top section here. So this next space in Teams, which we get to know, is called, some people call it the class nav. We call it tabs as well. So the navigation is to the left-hand side, which is this one here. So as you can see on the screen, the team algebra is selected. So this is this team here. So we see that the icon matches. And then it says general because we're here inside of the general channel. Moving along the tabs, the second area in the We space, tabs are options for each channel. Some tabs like posts and files are in every channel, but then you can add different tabs based on what you need for the channel. So for example, because this is a general channel for the algebra team, the teacher has added a tab which also includes assignments. You'll get a, we'll have a chance to kind of explore through these tabs a little bit later on. Wonderful. So now we have the spaces which we call the canvas. So the third main area of Teams. The canvas is essentially the workspace for whatever you have selected. On the screen shown, we see kind of the workspace for the post tab in the general channel in the algebra team, which happens to, be a class. Remember when you set up Microsoft Teams app, your team could also be something else. So it could be what we call like a PLC group. It could be, an after school club. And this post section will still always be the same. It just depends on what you need the team for. So let's have a look at some of these features here that we were talking about before in Teams. The very top one is what we call the activity app. And if you're familiar to kind of, I guess, the Messenger or Twitter environment, it has that exact type of feel. So when you click on that, it's going to give you a time-stamped activity log of what's been happening in your teams. We then have the chat feature. So this is separate to Teams. It's a one-on-one or small group chat area that you can use. We then obviously have our teams that we have with our students and maybe our professionals at work. We have the assignments tab. So this is kind of a nice place where all of our assignments come together, especially if you're in the secondary space, and you'll probably find that you have lots of teams because you'll have a team for every subject you teach. And this will kind of consolidate and bring all of those assignments together in one space. We then have the calendar, which is a great little feature. It does sync with if you're using an Office 365 calendar, it will sync with that. So if I open up my calendar in my Outlook and I make a change in there, that change will be reflected in my calendar inside of Teams. We then have the calls feature, which is if it's enabled in your organization, you will be able to call certain people who are part of your organization. So for example, because I work for a group that has multiple schools, I can actually call teachers from other schools. And then we have the file section. So what you will notice when you use Teams is that you will be putting lots of files in. You'll be putting Word documents and PowerPoints and PDFs. And if you're across multiple teams, sometimes you can forget where you actually put them. And so the file section will neatly organize and manage that for you. Let's have a look at creating a team. So when you open up Teams and you're in the Teams section, so you've clicked on Teams in the app bar, up in the top right-hand corner, you will notice a Join or Create Team option. Once you click that, we're going to be looking for this option here to create a team. For today's purposes, we're going to be looking at a class team. there are 4 separate types of teams, and I will go through them next. But we are just purely going to focus on the one today. So this little infographic I took from an education community group, and it was actually, I thought, a really brilliant infographic which helps to explain the relationship between each one of these teams. The primary thing that you'll notice between the teams are the permissions and the notebook. So for example, if we look at the first one here, the class notebook, the class team, you will be given a class notebook. So a notebook that is specifically designed to work with you and your students. You'll also be given what we call a read-only class materials folder, which is a folder for you as an educator to place materials in, and students can't edit them. They can only read them. And you'll also be given something called the assignments section or tab, which will allow you to distribute assignments. As you can see, there are 3 other different types of teams there. So a PLC team, a staff team, and an other team. They are all slightly different in their structures. They all depend on what you need the team for and whether you actually need a notebook or not. So for example, the last one, so some of your club groups or activity groups, they might not necessarily need a notebook inside of that space. So we would just create another team. Wonderful. So we're going to demo creating a team. So let's go to teams. Oh, let me. Let's go. We'll do it this way. Wonderful. So up here in the top right-hand corner, we're going to click on Join or Create Team. And then from there, we're going to select to create a team. And there we have those 4 options that we were talking about before. So for today, we're going to click on class, and we will call today's, let's call it EduDay. Can write an optional description there if you like. That is totally up to you. We're going to click next. So before I do this next step, actually, I will point out that if your organization or your school uses something that is called School Data Sync, you probably won't have to do this process for setting up class teams. Essentially what that is that it reads whatever software that the school is using to generate their timetable, and it makes the team for you. So when the timetable is distributed, the team will also distribute and appear in your Microsoft Teams. If you're not using that, you will have to follow this procedure to add in your students. So here on this section, I need to start adding in my student's name, and I'm just going to pop in my test student, and you would go through that same process of typing in each one of your students. If you do happen to have a distribution list, so like an email distribution list that holds all of those names in, you can type that in, select it, and it will add all of them or everyone that is in that list all in one go. If you happen to team teach, you would want to click here on teacher and start typing the teacher's name in and add them. We tend to, as general advice for teachers, say that you should try and include a second teacher anyway. The reason for that is it can be quite difficult if someone needs to get into your team because you're away to access it. So if we already have another teacher in there who may also happen to be on campus, they'll be able to jump into that team and maybe add in the relief teacher or the replacement teacher for that day. So let's add this student. Wonderful. And we're going to click close. And there we go. I have a brand new team created. So we have this brand new team. Let's have a look at how we're going to be able to manage that team. The first thing we're going to have a look at is how we might like to set up our channels. Channels appear in the Wii space, so in that left rail, and you can create whatever channels that you like. We do that by clicking on what's called the ellipses tool, which is the top yellow one, and then clicking on Add Channel. So before we do that, let's just have a look at a few examples here. The one on the left will basically give us is an example of what we have right now. Every time you create a new team or a new team is created for you, it will have the day, not the day, the name and the general channel, and that's there by default. We then have two examples there on the right-hand side. The 4B one is a primary school example, so this particular primary school teacher has created separate channels for each one of the subjects that they teach. And the one on the right-hand side is an example of a secondary mathematics team. And you can see that they have placed the unit names or topic names as their channels instead. And what they've also done to go a little bit further is they've numbered them. But it does work alphabetically. So if you do want things to sit in a particular order, you will need to number them. So let's have a look at setting up a channel. Wonderful. So over here where we look for the name of our team, we come over to the ellipses tool and we then come down and we click on Add a Channel. From here, this is where I can choose my channel name. So I might come in here and call this Has. Again, I can write a description if I'd like to. I tend to like to click this one, so this guy here. So this says to automatically show the channel in everyone's channel list. So that means that they won't remain hidden. So you can hide channels because maybe sometimes, depending on the type of team you're in, the channel may not be relevant to you. So you can choose to hide them. But in this case, I want all of my students to see this channel. So I click to add. There we go. There is also a second type of channel that can be set up. So if we come back here, click to add a channel, we have something called private channels. So if I click down here on privacy, I can choose to do what we call a private channel. And an example of what we might use that for is maybe something like group work. So I might come in here and go group 1. Make sure that's set to private. And when I go to next, I go to an additional screen, which we wouldn't have experienced before. And in this additional screen is where I start to add my students in. So I can go through there, start adding them one by one, whether they're in groups of 2, 3, 4, 5. It could, it doesn't really matter. And we can create these group work channels. Do keep in mind, if you are team teaching, that you will need to also add that additional teacher into that channel. When that one's created, so if we have a look over here, it says group 1. It will have a little padlock there to notify you that it is a private channel. Wonderful. So we're going to have a look at this idea of managing students. So quite often you'll have some students that might put some unhelpful comments. They might inappropriately say how they're feeling about something, and you want to kind of some tools in the software to help you to deal with it, because it doesn't always necessarily need to belong on a public forum. We do need to remember that your teams are public, so anything that you post in the conversation space can be seen by everyone in that team. These aren't one-to-one individual chats. So the very first thing we have here is the ability to delete student messages. So at any time, if you notice a message comes up, you can always go into that space and delete it straight away. Other students don't have permission to delete other students' messages. And we will look at this idea of whether you want students to be able to delete their own messages as well, because that one is optional. We also have this ability to mute students as well. So we will demo this, but you can manage your team, and once you're inside that space, you can choose to mute a student or the entire group as well. So if a particular student is really struggling to use that space appropriately, we can decide to go in and mute them for a period of time, and then go through that process of having conversations about appropriate use of technology. Also, when we have a look at managing students, it is worthwhile having a look at the members' permissions. And what we can see on the screen here is every type of permission that you can basically enable or disable. It's very important to remember that with the language inside of here, that members are students and owners are teachers. And the one that I'm showing you here as an example is the default setting that we have at our organization. I do want to focus on the bottom three here. So we happen to have on owners can delete all messages. So that means that teachers can delete all messages. And I always encourage that is turned on and you don't turn it off. Otherwise, you will lose that ability to possibly delete an inappropriate message that should not be there. And then you have the bottom two, which say give members, which means give students the option to delete their messages and give students the option to edit their messages. Now, these are always going to come down to individual choices amongst educators, but essentially, if a message goes up and you don't see it in time, and maybe the damage is already done, and it could be deleted without you even knowing what was actually written word for word. Now, that's obviously going to be individual choice for every single teacher, but it is important just to know that those settings are there. The other ones here, which we're just going to have a quick look at, is the fun stuff. And everyone always wants to know these ones. I don't mean to seem like the fun police, but there are things like emojis and memes and stickers and that inside of here. And you can make those choices about whether you want them turned on or off for your team. Wonderful. So let's have a look at demoing this. Now, what I'm just going to do is I'm actually logged in as my test student here. So just bear with me while I'm just going to quickly write a comment on behalf of a student. So let's write something like, how bad was class today, Mary? All right, there we go. So how bad was class today? Mary's hair looks so bad. So it's not very creative, but we kind of get the general idea. So this has been posted out by my test student. And also, keeping in mind, then my test student might come in and also put in, because they might think that they're really funny. and put in a little, like a little GIF in there as well. Now, obviously as an educator, I'm not going to think that this is appropriate. Okay, this is a conversation that probably needs to be had face to face, not more so the stuff about Mary, but about the class being bad. So we can take a couple of steps here. So as we saw before, I can choose to come over here and click on the ellipses tool and come down to delete, and delete that post, and also delete the second part that came with it. From there, we can come up to the ellipses tool up here next to the name of my class. Click on Manage Team. And here in Members and Guests is my student. So you'll have a list of students. I just have the one for the purposes of this presentation. And I can choose to select here to mute that student. If for some reason I needed to mute the entire class, I would just click here, Mute Students. And if I had a list of students, they would all be muted at the same time. Wonderful. So we're going to have a look now at just some top tips in regards to using Microsoft Teams. So let's start by looking at the conversation space. So here is what we call new conversations. So I'm going to click down on new conversations. And it just pops up with this little bar here for me to use to start writing in my message. There is, however, this little format tool here, which is a little A with, it's like a little pencil. So if I click on that, it opens up and gives me a few more options to format my message. The very first one, if we start at the top, is new conversation. From here, I can either keep it just as a conversation, or I can make it an announcement. Now, for the purpose of this, I'm going to change it to announcement, and I'm going to show you in a minute why. It's one of my tips of how I like to set up my channels. So we're going to click here on announcements. Okay, and I might write in, swimming this Friday. Oops. From here, you can click over here and choose, some different colors if you like. You can click on the little picture tool. You can choose an illustration, or if you've got your own, you can upload your own image. So let's look at some of the illustrations. So these ones are provided by Microsoft. There they are. So you can kind of flick through, and if it's class related or sports or activity related, you can kind of look and see if there's something here that suits your needs. So I might choose just this one here. It just gives it a bit of flair. The other one here we're going to look at is this posting in multiple channels. So this guy here. If you happen to teach across multiple subjects, so you have 2 Year 7 maths classes, or there are 2 Year 6 classes, and you want the same message to go to both Year 6 classes at the same time, you start by writing your message in your class, and then by clicking on the post in multiple channels, what we can do is over here we can select a different channel to also post in. And when I do that, I can go through and I might say that this needs to be pasted, also included in Nathan's demo class. So I select down and I go, let's post that in the general channel. And I click to update, and we can see here that it's now going to go to this class, and it's also going to go to this other class. So I don't have to go into 2 separate teams and write the same message twice. It can just go out once. So along the toolbars here, we have our standards like, bolds, italics, underline, strike through, highlighting. We can manage text sizes, colorings. You want to use particular headings, indentations, all of the stuff that we're used to. We do have this little cool one here, which is if this is really important, I can click to make it important. So it kind of comes up slightly different for the students, and with these red lines, they get the little exclamation mark next to their team, so they know that something here is important. And we kind of have our undo and repeat options there. Here you can choose to write in a subheading, and we can also choose to type in our announcement. Now, when typing an announcement, if you want students to be notified, we do something called at mentioning. So what that is, so I hold down Shift and then 2 to put an at, and then I have a couple of choices here. I can either choose to notify everyone, and to notify everyone, I just type the name of the team. So that is the name of my team. So, and I might also include the other team. So that was at, I think it's, or sorry, actually, what we would want to do if we want to do both teams, we would do at, and then we would write the channels that they've gone into. So this is going in the general channel. So I would write general. Basically, everyone in the general channel who belongs to that, which also happens to be everyone, will be notified. So from here, because we are in this formatting, I can hit enter without posting and go to the next line. And I can write in my message, don't forget it's swimming day on Friday. And then, as you know, you can keep going, please bring, and because you can also do dot points or lists, okay, I can click here and I can start writing down everything that they will need. Oh, so I was going to write sun hat for some reason, but yeah, a hat to protect you from the sun. And you get the general idea. I can keep going along and typing in as I go. Wonderful. I'm just going to remove that guy there just so that they don't get notified. And then right down the bottom here is our little send button. So I'm going to click that one there to send, and off goes my message. So that's typically how we would write a message. Now, there are a couple of tips I like to give teachers about how to set these up, especially in the year levels where this is, they like to chat. They may not be allowed yet at home to have accounts to other softwares where they're allowed to chat, and you can get a bit of chatter going in here. So I like to follow a specific structure, and this is personal to me. Some people like parts of it, some people don't, and some people have their own type of structures. So what I like to do here is I'm in the general channel. So if I come up here to where it says general and I go over to the ellipses, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to click here to manage this channel. So just managing this channel. Now, because it's the general channel, the permissions are slightly different. And what I like to do, I like to change it here to only owners can post messages. So what that's essentially done now is it's just a messaging board for myself to let students know things. They can't put their own messages up here, and they can't reply to my messages. So it is pretty locked down, but we are going to look at our other options here. So in the general channel, I just like that to be where my posts go for students to know. If we click over here on the hash channel, because this is like a subject or it's a topic, it's a subject. I'm going to set this up slightly differently. And what I'm going to do here, and other channels will give you this option, is I'm going to click again on the ellipses tool and click again on manage channel, but it looks slightly different. Because what we can do is we can moderate this channel. So I'm going to click here and turn on moderation. And it says who can moderate. And at the moment, it's the team owners, which is the teachers, which is me. But I'm going to leave these on, and especially this one. So allow members to reply to channel messages. So what that does for me when I go back is when I start a new conversation, and I might come up here and give it a title if I want. And let's hypothetically say task. So please bring in materials for your projects, and then I might write a list of what those materials are, and we can make it look pretty with announcements. We all know that, but I'm just going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to put that in. The thing that changes here is that the students see that and they can reply. So they can reply specifically to that post or question, because this could be a learning activity. It doesn't need to be a reminder. It could be something where I go in here and start posing questions and get students to reply to them with their answers, that I can leave this open for them to reply. But what they can't do is they can't click this down the bottom, this new conversation tab. It's actually grayed out for them. So they can't just start new conversations, so things get lost. But they are by all means welcome to come in and reply to something that I have said. And what that will do for you is it will allow you to collapse all of that work and that conversation into that one question that you originally posed. The other one that I like to do, which is where we leave it open, is I'm going to create, excuse me, another channel here, and I'm going to call it, everyone calls them different. Some people just call them homework channels. Some people call them, help channels or assistant channels. The one I do see most often is homework help. So let's just call it that for now, but obviously you could make this whatever you wanted. And I'm actually not going to change this channel. I'm going to leave it completely open. Something I encourage you to do, or to get to a stage of doing with your students, is empower them to start asking questions of their own. To go in there to say, has anyone found any research on the topic that we're learning in English at the moment? I'm really struggling to find anything about this person prior 1980s. Does anyone? I forgot to write. You could post your homework in here as well, but if you haven't, someone might come in and go, what did we learn in class today? Was there anything important? And it does take time to build that up. But when you offer students a platform like this and you encourage it, it will start happening. And I've seen it many, many times across lots of different teachers that I work with. So I do encourage you to try and get to that stage of having an open channel. And what you will notice with it is that over time, that students will kind of manage it themselves, that they'll start answering each other's own questions, and you'll start building this real collegial or collaborative working environment for them to come into and feel safe about seeking help. You by all means might come in and also answer questions, but you might just, pop in every now and again. And I'll just show you this here, something you can do. If I'm going to like my own message here, you can give them emojis. So I have lots of teachers, when students give really great replies to other students' questions, the teacher just comes in and gives it a love heart. You know what I mean? Or they come in here and they give it a thumbs up, as in, that was a really good answer, well done. So I do encourage you to have a go at that. Obviously, these tips and that structure is personal to how I like to use the software, and maybe you might like to do it a little bit different, and it's all going to be individual to how you like to use it in your class. Wonderful. So I would like to thank you for coming along today. As I said, that these sessions have been recorded, so they will be made available in the Microsoft YouTube channel. Let's go back one there. If you have any further questions, I do reach out on platforms like the social, so mainly like Twitter. Do go to the Microsoft Educator Center. There are lots of resources there, so you can log into that center. You can find lots of resources that you can use with your class, resources just to upskill yourself and earn lots of certificates and badges. So please do feel free to go have a look if you're look in that space if you're looking for some further information. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.